2009. 2009 was a very different time. Eminem was at the top of his game. Blue denim jeans were all the rage, and Intel deemed it acceptable to release a 2-core, 2-thread, 1.86 GHz CPU.
Wing.
Recently I came into possession of a Dell Precision T7500. This heavy chassis houses dual Firepro V5700 graphics cards, which feature a whole 512MB of GDDR3 VRAM each. But the star of the show has to be the E5502, Intel's 1.86 GHz 2-core, 2-thread CPU solution from 2009.
And oh boy, am I excited to show it to you. So after spending about an hour and a half looking for drivers on the internet, we were able to sit back, relax, and benchmark the hell out of this thing.
Starting with the gaming benchmarks, it's very clear that this PC can just about handle 3D gaming in esports titles such as CSGO and Chivalry Medieval Warfare. However, if you want to achieve playable FPS figures, you will have to drop the resolution and the graphics settings. At 1360 by 768p, CSGO is able to get an average FPS of 69, a 1% low of 42 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 14 FPS. This indicates heavy stutter, however the game was still playable to a certain extent. Chivalry Medieval Warfare got very similar FPS scores on the low preset 1360 by 768p, an average FPS of 51, a 1% low of 22 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 16 FPS. However, this game was very playable. On the other hand, 2D games run almost flawlessly. A popular 2D survival game, Don't Starve, manages to get an average FPS of 60, a 1% low of 51 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 47 FPS. This ran very smooth, and anyone would be happy with this performance. Shellshock Live, another popular 2D game, managed to get 108 FPS on average, 71 FPS as a 1% low, and a 0.1% low of 51 FPS. This was very playable, no stutter, anyone would be happy. By far, the most playable game we benchmarked. Unfortunately, simulation-based games such as Kerbal Space Program, whilst providing a playable average FPS on the medium preset on the 1360 by 768p resolution, they fail to provide in the 1% and 0.1% low FPS scores. The 1% low dropped all the way down to 19 FPS, and the 0.1% low hit an all-time low of 9 FPS. This indicates heavy stutter, however the game was still very playable, as for this genre you do not require a high FPS to play. Another game, Universe Sandbox, was able to crank up the settings all the way to the high preset, and still achieve a very playable FPS on the 1360 by 768p resolution. 46 FPS was the average. The 1% low was just 16 FPS, and the 0.1% low hit an all-time low of 7 FPS. This indicates massive stutter. However, these slow-paced games you do not require a very high FPS, and I'd still say the game is playable enough. The final game we benchmarked was Civ 5. Civ 5 is a strategy game, a 2D one at that, and on the medium preset on the 1360 by 768p resolution, we were able to get a playable FPS of 55. However, these numbers do not transcend down to 1% and 0.1% lows. They hit 20 and 7 FPS respectively. This indicates heavy stutter, however this was mostly due to the graphics cards we used, as the game is very GPU intensive. Upgrading these in the future may yield better performance, but as of right now, the game being slow paced still makes it playable with these low FPS scores. We did also try to test the game GTA 5, a more modern game, but you never know. Unfortunately, the 1.86 GHz CPU just cannot handle the modern game. The floor does not load, the map has no textures, it's not really playable.
But how does the aging Xeon processor stack up in Cinebench, a popular multi-core CPU benchmark? Well, not very well it would turn out. The nearly 9-year-old Xeon chip slowly churned out a CPU score of just 101. For those of you that are not experienced with Cinebench, even my 2016 Skylake Mobile i3 laptop can get a score of about 250. But how well did the graphics card benchmark? Again using Cinebench, we ran the OpenGL test to get an average FPS of 24.13. Not exactly ideal for gaming, but a surprisingly respectable score nonetheless. But these raw performance figures don't mean much when there's nothing to compare the machine against. So how does it perform in day-to-day tasks? So whilst the PC may be cumbersome in modern gaming titles, it certainly can breeze through everyday web browsing activities, and fly through YouTube playback as it can be seen buffering a 1080p YouTube video flawlessly with 0 frame drops.
Thank you all for watching so much. I hope you learned a lot, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you don't want to ever buy a 1 GHz CPU again, and good night.